What is going on, everybody? Fluxo here and welcome to this week's video. Just before we jump into the video, I just want to say how close we are to our end of year goal of 10,000 subscribers. I can't thank you all enough, the support has just been overwhelming. In this week's video we're going to be looking at how to design the perfect blueprint for your fuel generators. This will hopefully give you guys something direct that you can follow yourselves, or at very least some useful ideas to implement into your own fuel generator builds. As always, if you do like the video, make sure you let me know via the likes, the comments, and maybe even consider subscribing and helping us get into that 10k by the end of the year. Without further ado, let's get into the video. I started off by developing the octagon shaping for the fuel generator itself. I did this by creating a cross section of foundations, then using the row barrier technique to connect the corners. Once I had made the shaping with foundations, I outlined it with concrete walls. That way I could work inside of the build and keep its shape at all times. From there I added a layer of 1 meter foundations over the top. This was so that I could hollow out the 4 meter foundations below and create a room underneath the fuel generator itself. With the lower room now hollowed out, I added another layer of 1 meter foundations over the top and then an additional 3 1 meter foundations vertically across the centre. Why we are doing this will become clear when I install the sign lighting for down below. From underneath I hollowed out the central foundations and then used a beam to attach a large billboard to act as lighting for the lower section of the build. Knowing that the game would not allow me to place a fuel generator over the top of this, I removed the rear foundations and made a pathway of signs to keep my large billboard's positioning. I then removed everything so that I could install my fuel generator. Once the fuel generator was installed, I then removed the back 2 foundations and using the pathway of signs I reinstalled my large billboard for the lighting underneath. From there I added my second to last layer of 1 meter foundations with my fuel generator installed, as we will eventually be encasing the bottom framework of the generator itself. Finally, I can now drop under the build and install the block colour into the billboard to act as lighting for the lower deck of the build. With that done, I was now able to add my last layer of 1 meter foundations to completely hide the lower framework of the fuel generator. This gives it the feel that the machinery was sat perfectly in the foundation alone. To shape the front, I used half foundations and the row barrier method to give the foundation a shaped opening to receive the pipework. I then found out that a 1 meter ramp worked perfectly to keep the generator's input exposed. With the foundation and shape of the build coming along nicely, I started to give the build structure by adding small concrete pillars as edging around the build. Whilst doing this, I decided that I wanted the fuel generators to connect with each other via the walkway down the back, so I amended the back end of each build to correspond with each other perfectly. With the structured outline now installed, I wanted to add railings, but first I needed to lift the pillars around the structure by 1 meter. I used beams to allow me to do this and get the right height for the pillars. Now the concrete pillars are amended at the right level, I added my railings around the edging of the build. Next I used painted beams to give me a ridge wall effect and shape around the build. Before adding the beams to the rear wall of the build, I first installed my wiring for the generator itself. With the beams now installed, I decided to paint them black to give the build more depth. From there I added the side entrances and layered the ridge beams above them. For the input area of the machine, I used row barriers to attain the angle I needed before replacing them with beam connectors and beams to finish. To cover the exposed concrete and foundations around the build, I painted the foundations themselves black. I added sign lighting around the front, side entrances and rear of the build to make the building itself feel more operational. I also painted the railings and generator to best suit the colour scheme around the build. Lastly, I finished this part of the build by adding 2 meter lighting around the main post of the build. I then used the trim for the bottom edging of the beams themselves. The main part of the build now finished, all that was left to do was to build the pipe connectors in a separate blueprint. Please make sure before you do clear the blueprint that you have saved. For the pipe connectors, I went for the simple but clean look to match the generator build itself. I started by placing 4 pillars, 2 pillars high across from each other. I then used large concrete pillars and foundations to give myself the slide effect to install a 1 meter wall. This allowed me to pinpoint exactly where I wanted the pipe connectors to fit. Make sure that you connect the pipe in between the pipe connectors before reinstalling your concrete pillars. I then use foundations and pipe connectors to find the center line to align my pipe splitter up perfectly. With that now done, all that was left to do is to add a few aesthetics to make it match up with the design of the fuel generator. The lights now installed, I added beams to the lower part of the pillars to give structure and left the bottom beams orange to match the previous build. From there, all we have to do is paint the pipe and the splitter, and then lastly show you guys how easy it all is to install. Once you have your first building aligned, place down your generators by holding Control to match them up side by side. Again, follow this process on the mirroring side. Next, take your pipe connectors and place them aligned to the pipe inputs of your machines. Lastly, install your pipes, and just like that, you have a fully functioning setup. As always guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know via the likes, the comments, or once again, help us get to 10k and hit that subscribe button. Thank you all so much for the love, the support that you show on each video. It keeps this channel afloat and me in a job, so I really do appreciate it. I will leave you all with some final shots of the builds, but as for myself, I'll catch you all in the Discord.